Good morning, everybody. Hello. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I greatly welcome this opportunity to speak to this influential audience in this Sustainable Finance Day. And my first words want to recognize and thank all the organizers for making this possible, this team building experience in COP25 possible. To Alicia and all the team has been involved with very short notice. Climate change has a global impact, as you are aware, so it requires global actions. We all cooperate, sharing the cost and benefits tied to the joint efforts needed to reshape our economic growth model, rendering it more sustainable for our generation and the future ones to come. Today, in the first panel, we had the opportunity to share some impact assessment about what is going on climate change. It is time to perform and contribute to the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030. Easy to say, but challenging to accomplish. But we like challenge, and we are here to face them. We have heard about energy fair transition strategy, national climate and energy plan, and many other measures the government has been implemented in the agenda for change. Concerning the Official Credit Institute as a chairman, and before giving you a flash outlook about what we are doing in concrete terms about climate change, I want to share three thoughts with all of you. First, that we all are driven by a common interest related to the Agenda 2030 and climate actions as one of the main Sustainable Development Goals. SDG and climate actions has come here to stay, and to stay forever. We have declared the urgency of all these measures, and all through a multilateral approach, we have to work together. And we have to work together through the PPP, through the private and public partnership. It's not only concerning government or public sector, it is concerning also private sector. And not only the financial entities, and today we are going to share with National Promotional Bank panel a lot of our experience, but also with private banks, institutional investors, but also the companies, above all small and medium-sized companies all across all the economic sector, industrial, technology, and service sector, involving the civil society too. And thirdly, one thought is climate action has to be tackled with the market and not against the market. We have to introduce positive incentives to promote a fair transition for implementing the renewable energy, the energy efficiency methods, fostering mobility, sustainable mobility, water and waste treatment, etc., etc., and granting, of course, a level playing field. And this is very important for us. As a chairman of the Official Credit Institute, we are ready here to share our resources and our expertise with the financial sector, and of course, with our small and medium-sized companies who are our clients. And sustainability and climate actions is within the eco-governance and culture. We have implemented measures to reduce our carbon steps through the decarbonation of our activity. We are very proactive, as already the Secretary of State for Economy and Business Support has said, in government support. On the liability side, we have been issuing in this year the first green bond, and also for the first time our issuing of social bonds. There are two sides of the sustainability. Climate action has to involve social sustainability too, and for the first time in history, this social bond has been at negative interest rate. We have been on the asset side implementing a lot of projects on renewable energy, not only in Spain, but also abroad, above all in Europe and in Latin America with our partners from other national promotional banks, and of course with the private sector. And within this regional approach, one of the main actors are the European Investment Bank's policy, who have a very important role for the future on climate action. We have here the honor to take into consideration Emma Navarro, the Vice Woman of the European Investment Bank, who is very proactive on all these kind of policies. I am sure, as ICO is participating with the European Investment Bank with the joint initiative for circular economy with other European national promotional bank and with the Clean Ocean Initiative. And that's all. Thank you very much for your attention, and please let's give a warm welcome to Emma Navarro.
Good morning to everyone. Let me start by thanking the Spanish government for the impressive organization of this event. I think that you have worked very hard with the Chilean presidency, and this is clearly a success. And let me also start thanking Jose Carlos and ICO. ICO is one of the key partners of the EIB, but this is also an institution to which I have a special affection. And I am very pleased to see here so many familiar faces in the panel and also so many friends. And I think that the topic that we are covering today cannot be more relevant. Multilateral and national promotional banks have indeed a key role to play to scale up the critical investments that we need to achieve the decarbonization and to meet the Paris Agreement goals. And scientists are telling us that we have a critical decade ahead of us to alert and avoid catastrophic climate change. And that has given us a clear direction of travel. We need to cut emissions drastically, and we need to achieve climate neutrality by mid-century. And yet, carbon emissions today continue to increase. They are registering record levels, and they show no signs of abating. And every report that is published today on the situation presents an even gloomier picture. So, through the transition to a low-carbon future is a complex challenge, an unprecedented challenge that involves a huge transformation of our societies and our lifestyles, but it is also inevitable, and it has a lot of opportunities, especially for institutions that are devoted to promote investments. Massive investments will be required in the next 10 to 15 years to achieve this decarbonization. In fact, the United Nations have estimated that the world will need to invest $3.8 trillion to achieve the target, the 1.5 target that is the safe level to which we need to go. And the financial challenge is huge. And as Jose Carlos was mentioning before, we need the private sector and we need the financial sector, and these policies should be taken together with the financial sector. Of course, no public balance sheet can cope in isolation with this type of challenges that we are facing. But also, public development banks, our institutions, have also an important role to play to mobilize this type of investments, the scale of investments that are needed. We can help mobilize and crowd in other investors using our catalytic role and providing risk mitigation instruments for the critical investments, some critical investments that are needed. And for the EIB, the course is clear. Climate action has been a top priority for my institution for many, many years, and this is in line with the EU global action efforts and with the EU leadership on this front. In the last 5 years, we have provided more than 150 billion euros of financing to climate and environment projects worldwide. And this has allowed us to mobilize more than 550 billion of investments into these objectives. But yet, the scale of the challenges that we are facing today requires greater ambition. The scale of the challenge is unprecedented, and we cannot afford business as usual. And because of that, and also because the Commission will be presenting very soon a new European Green Deal, we had to increase our ambition. And that is what we have done. A few weeks ago, we adopted a new climate strategy that tries to position the EIB as the EU climate bank. Our intention is to mobilize and accelerate the scale of financing that it is needed to contribute to this goal. And our climate goals, our climate policies will apply both to our European operations, but also to the operations that we do outside Europe. And our ambition has 3 pillars. The first pillar will be to unlock €1 trillion of investments to climate and environmental investments in the next decade that we know it's the critical decade. For that, we will increase the share of our financing to 50% of our activity by 2025. And the third goal, and very important, we are committed to aligning all our financial activities with the goals and principles of the Paris Agreement, because we know it makes no sense to do a lot of climate financing if the rest of our activity is damaging those goals and principles of the Paris Agreement. And a clear example of our commitment, and something that has gotten a lot of praise, appraisal and compliments here in the summit, has been our energy lending policy. By 2021, we will stop financing energy projects based on fossil fuels, including gas, and we are in fact the first multilateral bank that has done and adopted such a policy. And an important element of our strategy is going to be the support for the just transition. And this has also been mentioned by José Carlos. We have committed to develop tools to support those most affected by the adjustment costs that will inevitably come with the transition. Those most affected, such as coal-dependent regions. And quoting President von der Leyen in the summit a few days ago, when she said, the transition must work for all, the transition won't work at all. And the same goes for developing countries and the responsibility that we have to assist them, and we have much discussion on this topic here in the conference. And this is precisely what the OECD will convey later today in the presentation here at the COP later today of its report on aligning development cooperation with ambitious climate action. And the message is clear and loud for our institutions. Addressing climate change is inevitable and urgent. And now what we need to do is walk the talk. We need, and this is something that has been repeated and is the motto for the conference, it is time for action. And our institutions have a concrete role to play in promoting the right policies and mobilizing the investments needed. And we need to align our activities with a pathway that is consistent with the Paris Agreement goals. So the good news, and this is also something that José Carlos has mentioned, is that all of us are responding. We are increasing our climate work and we are increasing our commitments. But I think that this is very important. None of us will bring the changes needed alone. We need to work together, and this is why events like this are so important. And as public banks, we are natural partners, and partnerships today are more important than ever. And I would like just to finish saying that my institution that is working closely with all other multilateral development and national development banks, including those here in the panel, is committed to do so, to work with others to achieve this challenge and succeed in this journey. Thank you very much.
Good morning to everyone. A very warm welcome to everyone, and in particular to Secretaria de Estado and Vice President Navarro. Well, my name is Antonio Andres. I'm head of international finance and UE affairs, and we are very honored and excited of conducting this panel today. We gather today extremely distinguished panelists. We have an extremely relevant audience, and we have touching a subject that really is in our backbone of the strategy of ECO. Time for action, time to act has been recalled. We are facing a global change, a global threat, but this time we have good news, and is that we are all on the same side to challenge this threat. We are all institutions and countries, at least all of us, fighting on the same side. And to take this threat, to take this challenge, we need three armies. We need enterprises, we need governments at the national level, at the local level, and at the regional level. But third, we need financial institutions. And in this regard, that will be here on the panel touched. We bridge today two regions that are strongly committed to the climate change, Europe and Latin America. Today we gather here more than 3 trillion euros balance sheet, which represents 2/3 of the European pumped up central bank balance sheet. This is a significant dry firepower that we have available to this fight, and these three elements is extremely important. I will go with a common question to our panelists, but first of all, let me introduce, although the institutions do not need presentation, they are all known by all of you. But first of all, Gemma Sacristan, which is considered by Latin trade one of the 50 more influential women in Latin America. She's been since 2008 working in IDB, but she's got a vast experience in other private banks and institutions, public institutions, especially focused in Latin America. On my left, Carlos Linares from COFIDE, our brother Peruvian promotional bank. Carlos has also a great experience that will bring at some point as a general manager on financing on the oil public company in Peru, Petroperú. So that will come at a certain point, I guess. Edgardo Alvarez from Alide, we keep in Latin America. Edgardo Alvarez, also 40 years experience in public finance, private finance, a great view on financial institutions in Latin America. ALIDE is the Association of Latin American Banks of Development. There is 19 institutions, 80 institutions of 19 countries, so strong representation. And now we cross the Atlantic and we have Europe. Europe represented by LT, European Long-Term Investment Association, the broader organization of ALIDE, I guess. 20 countries represented, of 28 EU countries, 27 in a couple of weeks, I guess. And Helmut has a very interesting experience because he joins the promotional bank, private banks, but as well he worked in the EU task force for Greece in the past. So he will, let's say, he's waving in the permeable boundaries of politics and economic. After 2005, he works in Brussels, so that will give a very interesting perspective to all of you. And last but not least, the biggest public bank in Europe, Dr. Funke, he's Secretary General of the board in KfW, working in KfW since 1996. A great experience, especially in some departments that will give a clear perspective on project finance, export finance, and KfW is a close partner of ECO, as well LT and ALIDE. So we have to underline here that we are here between friends and partners. We all work together, and this is important because this is a task that has to be addressed by a joint force, as I mentioned. If I may, we are running short of time, so I will go straight to my first question to all of you. This is a common question that I would like to address to you, and is how institutions or how are contributing to achieve this objective of the convention, and moreover, how relevant is this activity within your institution? If I may, Gemma, please, I will start with IDB that has a very broad perspective on Latin America. They screen every single project in Latin America, so your opinion will be very welcome.
It's a real pleasure to stay here today, and congratulations to Spain for organizing not only this event, but the whole summit in such a short period of time. Back in 2016, the IDB group divided into two banks. The IDB works exclusively with the public sector, and IDB Invest, the bank I represent, with the private sector. In any case, both institutions share the same values and for sure the same objective, which is to contribute to the sustainable development of the regions. Everything we do is related, or it could be fit to both or the most important sustainable agendas, both the Paris Agenda and the 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goal Agenda. More or less to give you an idea about our footprint, the IDB finance every year around 10–12 billion dollars, and we IDB invest around 5 billion. So our footprint is around $15 billion with our own capital plus mobilization, and we have the commitment that at least 30% of everything we do is climate related, both mitigation and adaptation. In any case, this year we wanted to raise our ambitions, and we have just announced that from next year going on, we are going to have 30%, no target, it's going to be just a floor. So our ambition is to finance at least $25 billion in the next 3 years. So I'm going to give more details later on, but Latin America is not so concerned about mitigation. Our big problem is around adaptation, and we are working together, both the public and the private sector, to really tackle these problems and to put not only financing but also blended finance and technical cooperation to address all these challenges.
Thank you very much, Gemma. Very interesting figure, 30%. So we will try, if we gather in this 3 trillion representation of balance sheet, if we gather a figure of commitment to climate change. We still keep in Latin America, and Edgardo, please, you represent more than 80 institutions, 19 countries, most of Latin America and some Caribbean. Is it a common goal in the institution you represent?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, ICO, in the name of our nice president, Mr. José Carlos García, for the opportunity to tell you about what in ALIDE and our members in Latin America are doing in regards to the climate change mitigation. As Antonio mentioned, we are almost 90 institutions that gathers ALIDE. We have members from Development Bank from all over Latin America, and we are also proud to have members from Spain. We have ICO and COFIDES. We have members from Germany. We have KfW from France, and also from Portugal, and also from India and Russia. All our members have assets for more than $5 trillion in common, and a portfolio of approximately $3.5 trillion. And what is remarkable that an important amounts of environmental financing are being granted by our LAC development banks. For the periods from 2013 to 2016, they approved an annual average of $10 billion for environmental financing, of which an average of 29 to 59% of this amount were delivered together with other institutions like IDB, like multilaterals and other multilaterals, climate funds, and other external funds. And even we have begun to issue bonds in our markets. We have issued bonds in the 4 years for about $4 trillion US. We think that these figures sound great, but even though development banking is a pioneer in the region, we understand that more have to be done. And for example, 81% of our development banks, for example, only 70% have financing programs, and we're working to have 100% of our development banks with environmental financial programs.
Thank you very much. We will take, for the second question, more have to be done, of course. And we cross the Atlantic and then we come to Europe. And then, well, we have the European Long-Term Investment Association. Helmut, we are working closely with them in the InvestEU program, 38 billion euros guarantee on the next MFF. ICO is involved with other MPVs as well as KfW. And please, Helmut, different perspective in Europe from Latin America?
Yeah, thank you very much. National promotional banks and institutions in Europe, these are today 30. We just welcomed the 30th member in Europe, representing 22 member states, as well as associated members, which brings multinational financial institutions to us, and the European Investment Bank as a permanent observer. Last year, 2018, our members committed roughly 140 billion euros of commitments, of which 50 billion roughly are investments in sustainable projects. And with this share of more than 35% of our commitments to sustainable projects, we think this is a good result. But it's a strong incentive to be a front runner of sustainable finance in the future as well. Since our members are owned by public authorities, by the government of the European Union, we implement public policy. And this means financing for energy efficiency, innovation, export project financing, infrastructure or SME financing. And this includes also financing for new technologies which are used and which are more efficient and more sustainable. But to describe it in more practical terms, we provide financing for modern transport infrastructure so that citizens can change from plane to train. We provide financing for renewable energy projects such as offshore and onshore wind farms. We provide financing for a 160 megawatt solar plant in southern Morocco, the largest energy complex in the world. We provide financing for the development of a wave power plant in Italy. Energy efficiency measures in buildings in Bulgaria, Poland, France, Germany, and many more member states. The joint initiative on circular economy was mentioned several times, but this is also an important commitment of our members for sustainable finance. I could continue with these examples for more than 1 hour, but this should give you a flavor what national promotional banks and institutions are doing in Europe. One last message at this point, and it was raised also several times in the contributions. The high need for financing will bring together public budget, public financing from institutions like national promotional banks, like multinational financial institutions, but first of all, the private market. Private investors are more necessary than ever, and national promotional banks have developed models to include private investors in this challenge for the future.
Thank you very much, Helmut. We have another figure, 35%, so we are putting a threshold of 30% up to now. And please, Dr. Funke, KfW is a close partner of ICO. We have several initiatives. Our president mentioned joint initiative on circular economy, Clean Oceans Initiative. We share common objectives and we work together closely in the InvestEU program preparing the new MFF. KfW, well, in Germany, what we study is that one third of the primary energy is consumed by buildings. You have an impressive facility on energy efficiency with more than 100 billion euros already financing more than 5 million houses, I guess. But as well, you work in development finance. You are the development institution of Germany with your branch, and also 58% is directed to climate. Also, those figures is really impressive. Could you tell us what's behind.
First, thank you very much. Thank you much for having us here, and thank you much for this very impressive organization in that speed of time. And honestly, when I saw this, I wasn't sure if we would have been able to do that in Germany. So I do consider a few things in Europe have changed, and apparently to the favor of Spain, which is good. Okay?
Thank you.
Second thing is, that was already my speech you gave, because you gave all the numbers, okay?
We study KF though you as a reference, and sorry.
No, but numbers is one thing. Of course, we are the German public bank, promotional bank. It's a balance sheet of 500 billion, so we do a lot promotionally domestically. We do it within Europe with partners, and we do it all over worldwide in development financing, in project financing, and we could give you hundreds of examples of good projects. But at the very end, you always have to see where actually do you focus on your business. And I think that has become more and more in the core that you go to sustainability. Our core is that our mandate we given out is environmental banking, responsible banking. So for the moment, 40% of all our financings every year goes somewhere into climate efficiency, environmentally friendly, which is around 30 billion every year new commitments. But they don't come just, by chance. You have to really focus where you want to add to. And this is why we actually have given us a roadmap on sustainable finance. What we have done is we have done a core mapping. We have done a mapping of the whole bank, of the initiatives, and we look exactly where they pay in. So we have a controlling system where we actually think it makes sense, because what you have to do is you have to come up with priorities. And you always have to prioritize, because you can't do everything on your own. You have to put out incentives. There has to be the private market with it, but you have to incentivize that they do something which is better. So if you do energy efficient housing, it's not that you can pay for the whole housing. You have to pay for the bit which is more expensive, because a more efficient house costs more than a normal one. So this is exactly where you have to come in with promotional banking, and you have to help that someone has interest in doing the better one. And this is how it works as an example for many things, and that's how we do the mapping and this roadmap, where we try to be in alignment also with the Paris goals.
Thank you very much. Impressive. And we fly back to Latin America, and we have an extremely interesting country. It's a country that doesn't pollute. It's 0.3. It's not one of the main who can blame on. But I think more than 90 of the climates are within Peru. It's going to be one of the most affected countries. COFIDE is fighting strongly. It's a close partner. We have finance with COFIDE on our Canal Internacional financing. And Carlos, I think for you will be easier to answer being chairman of COFIDE than being working at Petroperú for sure. So let us know what's been doing COFIDE. And
well, in first place, we'd like to thank for ICO for the invitation to participate in this panel, and also congratulations to the Spanish government for this organization. Well, in fact, COFIDE is the National Development Bank. It's been in the market for almost 50 years, and it has been very closely related to infrastructure financing in the country. Both sides at the beginning with the public sector, but also with the private sector. And as it has been mentioned before, as a National Development Bank, we play a catalytic role aiming to convey financing to infrastructure projects. COFIDE has been related to sustainable financing, and maybe at this time this was not a concept that was used, but for example, in financing the conversion of vehicles from diesel to natural gas, or also financing programs for efficient energy and renewable energy programs. In this program, for example, we have had the support of KfW here for several years ago, and also we are now playing an important role in financing infrastructure, no? Through, especially through PPP scheme projects. Peru has a huge gap in terms of infrastructure. For the next 5 to 7 years, the gap identified is around $30 billion, and we expect to keep playing an important role in financing part of these projects. And now, well, we are working in trying to become a green bank, not only with examples I have mentioned in terms of efficiency energy or sustainable projects, but also we think that we can play an important role in gathering different resources for financial sustainable projects.
Thank you very much, Carlos. We gave a general perspective of ex ante, what we are doing, what we are committed. But now I will come to a bit more difficult question, because we are being asked for more and more. Vice President Navarro mentioned 1 trillion euros. The figures that we are facing, the challenge that we are facing requires new investments, but requires new tools to finance. I will take, if I may, this inspiring word on the panel, which is ambition. Salvador Dalí said that intelligence without ambition is a bird without wings. So we need further wings to develop, and this is coming to this question common to all of you, and we will start again by Gemma. The second question is, your perception is that the activity, the tools implemented, the figures you mentioned have to be power up, have to be increased in the same way, or do we have to put in place, do we have to include new tools, new, let's say, new financial products? Mm-hmm. Gemma,
yeah,
please.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, we are fully on board with the statement of this COP, with ambitious, and we really need to do much more if we want to mitigate and to adapt to the effect of climate change. That's for sure. How we are doing it? Our strategy goes around investing in reversing. We really think that we can't change the past, but we can change the trend, or at least to influence in changing that trend. And we do it through 3 different kinds of tools. The first one is we promote a much more sustainable financial sector. We work with a lot of financial institutions, principally or basically banks, but more and more with microfinance institutions, funds, cooperatives, and other kinds of financial intermediary that can deploy resources in the region. The second, we play a crucial role in mobilizing additional resources, the billion to trillion statement. And the third, we incorporate resilience in all these smart investment we do. But how we do it? Basically, it's a mix of financial product, technical assistance, and knowledge creation and dissemination. I really would like to talk about a couple of products that have been really useful for us. The first one is partial and total credit guarantees. We really think that as a multilateral institution, we need to be the first mover, and we need to take additional risk that others, especially the private sector, is not willing to take, especially when we talk about new technologies in energy, for example. We work in bringing the first solar project, for example, in El Salvador and in other Central American countries, but also we finance the first geothermal project in South America, in Chile, with Cerro Pabellón. And in order to do that, we use blended finance resources. We are the largest multilateral bank in the region, and we are the ones that have access to more resources. As of today, it's around $1 billion. We work with 7 donors with 19 different programs. And those funds have been really useful for us to move the agenda, especially in the mitigation side in the past. Now, the challenge is to go from mitigation to adaptation. Regarding guarantees, we've been really active, especially in the capital markets. If we want to mobilize more resources, we need to bring additional investors. Even though we think we are making a good effort, It's not enough with our own resources, and we need to bring other investors, especially institutional investors, both locally but also internationally. And in order to do that, you need to provide them with certain assurance and certain risk mitigation tools. And there, we've been providing partial credit guarantees, especially in some green bonds and sustainable bonds. For example, we have supported Vinte, which is a housing company in Mexico, and together with them we issued the first housing green bond in the Americas. But second, we've been working in Brazil, for example, providing total credit guarantees to sustainable infrastructure projects. And they are working with Brazilian private called the Ventures of Infrastructure, which basically is a bond, a note that has some fiscal incentives for investors to get into this new area. We provided a total credit guarantee during construction to make that note investment grade and in order to mobilize additional resources. So for us, which is important, as I said, is to bring additional investors into the table and to be able that we create new asset classes that encourage people to get into this new resilient economy and decarbonization. So financial product, technical assistance and knowledge creation, and within the financial products arena, we've been really focused on the uses of blended finance and total and credit guarantees.
Thank you, Gemma. You brought two very interesting points, which is bringing other investors. We cannot pay the bill with public banks, and maybe it's one idea that will be repeated, also technical assistance. And, well, Edgardo, I don't know if this is shared still in Latin America with other financial institutions. Moving ahead, ex post, what we are going to do.
Of course. In Latin America, we are also ambitious. We have a lot of ambitions in regards with climate change mitigation. And we are aware that financial cooperation and the working relationship between multilateral, bilateral, and national development banks are the keys for the SDG goals, to get to the SDG goals. In the last 20 years, we have learned a lot. And we, in Alide, we work with, we have strategic alliances with different entities. We have a strategic alliance with KfW, and the Academy of Renewables Energies and RUNAC from Germany, with the AFD from France, and the Climate, Economic and I4C from France, EIB from Luxembourg, the International Development Finance Club, IDFC, the Long-Term Investor Club, the Standard & Poor's Global Markets, and the Economic Commission for Latin America, and of course with ECO. And with this strategic relationship, we provide to our members at least almost once a month an activity regarding to these climate change mitigations. And we are aware that we do need the direct access to resources of international funds, such as the Green Climate Funds. And of course, we need to mobilize capital from private funds and who are willing to invest in green projects. In Latin America, we have, as you mentioned, and in Peru, I was born in Peru also, we have a lot of, in Latin America, we're going to have a big problems with this climate change, and we have to work harder in capacity building for our institutions in order to create more, to develop the ability to evaluate the projects, the green projects, because normally we know how to evaluate a normal project, but we need to involve the people in our banks to better evaluate the green projects in Latin America. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Edgardo. We keep in Latin America, Peru, this affected country, but we share the idea of bringing other investors. ECO has issued social and green bonds for 3.5 billion euros. You issue a bond at the beginning of the year, a green bond, the first green bond, with the support of IDB. So I think we share these initiatives, but how is in Peru with this challenge that are affecting you in the future? How is looking exposed?
Well, actually, this is a part of the new instrument that we are developing. You mentioned before my experience in Peru. Also, formerly, I was in charge of the debt office in Peru, so I know very well the capabilities of the Peruvian government to raise funds locally and abroad. But this is a process that we have engaged with the support of IDB. First, we have this first green bond issuance in Peru. Also, we issued a month ago a sustainable bond, also in the local market in Peru. Both were for 100 million soles. Also, we have the support of IDB. And we are now working in trying to get the accreditation with the GCF. The idea is to be able to gather all these dedicated funds in order to be able to deploy these funds in a catalytic way to sectors that has been identified by the government. The government has issued a national competitiveness plan and also a national infrastructure plan, where these sectors that are oriented to mitigate climate change has been identified, like, for example, the forest sector, no? Where in the case of Peru, it has been identified that more than 50% of the gas emissions come from changes in the usage of land. And from this 50%, 90% come from deforestation. So we have some important goals to achieve there in the natural forest conservation and also in the forestry industry. And this is something difficult because it's a sector that is not very well known by the private sector. And also it needs long-term financing. So we need to gather, for example, this long-term financing in order to deploy these resources to create a new market, because the financing market for this sector is practically inexistent.
It's our role to create a new market. We roll together in this green bond and social bond market. So very, very good news to be together in the same side. We fly back to Europe. LT, Europe, and Helmut, to this question.
Yeah, from a European perspective, we see a diversity of challenges ahead of us. I would like to go to 3 points. One is the national energy and climate plans we just heard about. The second one are the European instruments. You mentioned InvestEU, and then the capability of national promotional banks and institutions. Thanks for the presentation earlier this morning about the National Energy and Climate Plan of Spain. And I have the figure of roughly 300 billion in mind, which is needed. And I'm pretty much sure that ICO will play a crucial role in helping to finance these 300 billion. So national promotional banks and institutions are asked in this endeavor. But you can also imagine that the National Climate and Energy Plan for Spain looks different to the one of, let's say, Estonia or the one of Malta. So we see a huge diversity of challenges ahead of us, and I think that's the good part of this exercise, to look what is needed in the different countries and in many cases also in the different regions. We heard also about the Just Transition initiative, and these are the regions which are heavily dependent on fossil fuel energy production. This is a huge challenge, but again, this is different compared from France, let's say, to Poland. So here we have to adapt to the situation where the member states start from, and here all our national promotional banks and institutions will play a crucial role, as we saw it here in Spain. The next one are the European instruments, which will help investors both public investors as national promotional banks and institutions, but also private investors in direct and indirect way to finance more risky projects. And as a banker, risk is always an issue, but we have to look for projects where we don't have sufficient experience in some cases. So KfW has a lot of experience in energy efficiency for housing, but there are other fields of the energy transition, of reaching the Paris agreement goals, where we don't have this much experience, which means for a banker simply more risk. And here European instruments will help significantly, and we have to look to use and to integrate these instruments in our business models, so that these instruments can help the situation in the specific member states. And here we come also to an important issue, which is cooperation and capabilities of financial institutions. Cooperation is key. We heard about the cooperation between EIB and national promotional banks. This will continue, this will be increased and improved, but it is for two reasons. The one is just the refinancing and the firepower. Smaller members from smaller member states, which have to finance bigger projects as well, they need refinancing. And here multinational financial institutions are crucial. Beside the fact that some of our members have a rating which allows them to have only a bit more expensive refinancing. So here, for example, EIB is extremely helpful. But it is also the transfer of know-how, experience, and here I quote again KfW, experience gained in the one or the other member institution. For example, with energy efficiency in housing, this was transferred to Bulgaria when they implemented their scheme, a bit different compared to the one of KfW, but this will be crucial in the future as well to increase this cooperation. We all summarized this in a statement, in a small document, and I put a few printouts in the back of this room where we describe what we are capable to do, but also what are the challenges ahead of us.
Thank you very much, Helmut. Dr. Funke, Germany, KfW.
We already get signs for the time, so I'll be sharp, and I think you gave a good overview on the challenges which are out there. I think what you can say for the moment is it's a good chance, because at the moment we get money and there's a high willingness to do something, and that makes a difference. We get money because of European funds and international ones and so on, but there's also big refinancing capabilities. You mentioned green bonds. We did until now 7 billion of green bonds for refinancing. So there's chances of getting that together, also on a European side and more. And there's a big refinancing vehicle on sustainable finance and green finance. And investors do like it. And you see that more and more coming, which is positive. And then the other one is obviously, on the second side, you have to be very precise on what you're doing, and we have to align the goals. And maybe the EU Green Deal helps. I think Ms. von der Leyen has a bit of a mission now. EIB has also become a mission now, if they like it or not. But they're supposed to become the climate bank. What we have to solve is the different national issues. If you look at this energy change, which you've looked, I mean, there's still a few on nuclear. There's still a bit on coal. In Spain, there's enough sun, you can go on solar. The Scandinavian countries and also Germany looks more into windcraft. Some don't know what to do at all, and we all don't have any modern grids. Looks like a complete disaster to me on one of the most important issues. So I think even though there's a lot of politics and national interests involved, we somehow have to align to get this together, because the issue is just too big. and we can't look on 2050. We have to look on what we do next year and don't postpone things over 10 years. So I think we have to be very precise, get common goals, look for what we can do, and then align up. And it's not a national way it works. There will be only a European, there will be an international way. That's what I really believe.
Yeah, it's extremely important. Network CEF, another European initiative that we didn't mention, are working towards getting the 10Ts and 10Es really developed, which is a need for Europe and to translate energy from one place to another. You mentioned the commitment of EIB. We have 5 minutes, but well, there's lots of kilometers behind and lots of CO2 emitted for this meeting. I think it's worth it, but I will make a provocative question to all of you or those who are brave enough to answer, and which is, you mentioned coal and other energies. We've been speaking of what we are going to do, what we've done in the past, but there might be some technologies that are not going to be financed or limited in finance. So which are, I think EIB opened the floor with 250 grams per kilowatt per hour, and which are going to be the industries or technologies that might have some restrictions or limitations? Or please, Gemma, if you want.
It's more than clear for us that utility scale, both solar and wind, is already a proven technology. I mean, price is quite stabilized and lower than ever. But we have some challenges about distributed solar, for example, where, I mean, the challenge remains in making models that are scalable. The second is electromobility. We are testing a lot of projects, both in buses but also in electric cars, and it's going to take time. It's going to take time to make them feasible and scalable as well. But the biggest challenge, at least for us in Latin America, is resilience, how we bring resilience projects, especially in agribusiness, in ports, and in other areas that are really related to the GDPs of the countries. So they are very important to share knowledge, I mean, to pilot projects, to learn about what it works and what doesn't, and to share knowledge and experience with other multilaterals and other banks are really important, because the private sector will not get into if they don't feel comfortable that the models are proven and that they can really, get their money back when they invest.
Thank you, Gemma. Dr. Funke, you were moving your head with the question. Something to say?
No, that's all fine. No, I think you're completely right that the only way out is actually innovation, because we can do a lot without whatever we got. We have to invest in new, innovative schemes. We have to see what happens. We have to see if gas to power works or whatever, or batteries. So the idea can only be we have to invest in smart cities, we have to invest in modern housing, and we have to see how we get some grip on this energy issue, because there might be different ways, but there has to be a more modern way how to solve it. And there might be also a lot of innovative financing. Not all of that will, become a dream and true. But this is the problem with innovation. You have to first invest in it. But I think the only way we can do it is a bit more ambitious financing also on the innovation side.
Carlos?
As Gemma mentioned, for example, we are working with ITB again in preparing a program for transport mobility in order to finance electrical buses for public transportation. The idea is to start with a pilot. But I think that the main challenge for Peru is related to mitigation, efforts for mitigate the climate change, the consequences for Peru being among the countries more vulnerable for this. In this sense, having also Peru being favored with the nation, we have natural conditions for example, wind farms or solar energy but we have to invest there in order to develop this kind of projects in Peru. No? And also, as I mentioned before, in the forest industry. No? Peru is one of the countries with the highest areas for with natural forests, or in order to also develop for reforestation to mitigate the climate change.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's time to wrap up. I would like that we see if we have, I think that there's lots of things in common, and I will underline some of them, and please correct me and include any of the ideas, because we have our head of communications around and she might be tweeting something, so let's agree on something. I think, as I mentioned, we cannot pay the bill alone. We need to bring other investors. That's something that it's clear. We need to be integrated. Dr. Funke mentioned we need the 10Ts, the 10Es to be developed. We need technical assistance, make projects happen. We need that those projects and the technology and the support at all levels are behind. But we also need innovation and have clear targets on technologies that need to be developed, and those that by any means not need to be developed or have to be aside. And this all has to be done together. We heard some figures: 30% of commitments to climate change, 40%, I think, KfW, 30%, 35%, and 30% in the case of COFIDE, no? So those are commitments impressive if we are speaking of a total balance sheet figure, as I mentioned, of 3 trillion euros, 1.4 in Latin America and 1.7 in Europe, including KfW. We don't have time for questions unless there is one question and someone really willing to make this question. So I will. Yes, we have one question. Time. Anyone? Please.
Hola. Yeah, I'm from Peru, and at least in our country there's lots of corruption. So I don't know if any other countries, but how do you do with fossil fuel industry that is so powerful, so for the country to be able to like run towards greener energy? Because in our country there's like, oh yeah, we put I don't know, scooters or electric cars, but the power of the fossil fuel industry is to get into politics and to like take down everything, to put more like problems towards cleaner energy. I don't know if anyone understood a little bit. No?
Well, I will take the first. I think that needs really a global, and it was already mentioned, a global commitment at all levels. We need to row together enterprises, governments at all levels, local, regional, and national, and financial institutions to fuel up these commitments. But we are doing. We heard from Secretary of Estado this morning the strong commitments of the government. We have the local and regional governments committed. Regulation is more and more restricted. I always mention the case of Kenya. They banned the plastic bags in one day. So regulation made happen that plastic is not available anymore in Kenya, and they have bigger problems than ours. So I think,
I think you always have, I mean, one thing is the policy. It doesn't work without a policy, okay? Nobody will buy electric cars if you don't provide a smart city where you can load them up. It's completely unrealistic. I mean, if we can invest in batteries and new batteries and easier batteries and whatever. If you can't load this thing up, nobody will buy it, okay? So, I mean, you have to have a policy, you have to have an idea of what you're doing. And there might be challenges, because a smart house, which is more energy efficient, is more expensive. On the other hand, housing gets more and more expensive. You want people to pay for that. And you have to balance those challenges. There will be many challenges on this. If you have an energy change, the price of energy will become much more pricey. that will be probably enormous. So you have to find ways how to balance that. And one thing is the policy, and then we can come in and do the measures. So it's all working together. And it doesn't work only on a national level. You have to come up and have to combine them, because if not, they're not efficient. You know, there's no more single island where you can involve something. You have to see how these measures work together, and then there might be different national interests, and there might be also different national needs. That's obvious all over the world. And everybody will challenge one's problems first, which is also normal. But you have to find an alignment somehow where you want to go. Then we can come in and finance. You know, if we have a certain framework, we're happy to come in with financing. That's why I said, I think the money is out there, because there's guarantees and whatever from the European level, and there's also from on the national level. If you look at World Bank and IMF, they're all out there. But you have to provide the framework, and that is probably the biggest challenge for the moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we are out of time. I will thank you very much to all the attendants. I will give an applause to the panelists that really did the best. And again, I would like to congratulate the organization. Excellent, outstanding, and we are proud as Spanish to have people organizing such events in such short time period. Thank you very much.